There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot touch. It does not announce itself with panic or loud declarations of despair. It simply arrives on a Tuesday morning when you open your eyes, stare at the ceiling, and realize the internal architecture of your chest is entirely hollow. You do not feel sad. You do not feel angry. You certainly do not feel joy. You feel the physical weight of gravity pressing against your skin and absolutely nothing else. You pull yourself up. You put on the required uniform of a functioning human being. You walk out the door and execute the daily performance with terrifying precision. You know exactly when to nod during a meeting. You know the exact muscular contraction required to form a polite smile when someone tells a joke. People look at you and see competence. They see someone who is remarkably calm under pressure. They praise your stoic reliability. But they cannot see that behind your eyes, the control room has been abandoned. You are operating entirely on residual momentum. This perfect imitation of life is not a sign of your strength. It is a symptom of a profound biological calculus taking place beneath your conscious awareness. Your nervous system has evaluated the environment, measured the remaining reserves of your mental energy, and quietly initiated a ruthless protocol. To keep the vital organs of your daily survival pumping, it has systematically cut the power to your emotional capacity. There is no malfunction here. This is an evolutionary defense mechanism executing its primary directive, shutting down the subjective experience of living to secure the mere biological continuation of the organism. You walk into a room full of people, and your brain instantly downloads the social script required to survive the next hour. You perform the calculus of interaction effortlessly. When a colleague complains about a minor inconvenience, you deploy the precise facial arrangement of empathy. You tilt your head. You lower your voice. You offer the expected verbal affirmations. From the outside, you look like a masterpiece of emotional intelligence. Society rewards this. They call you grounded. They label you as the strong one, the anchor in the storm, the person who never loses their composure. But they are fundamentally misreading the architecture of your stillness. This is not the calm of a peaceful lake. This is the rigid, frozen surface of a river that has stopped flowing because the temperature has dropped below the threshold of sustainability. What they interpret as quiet confidence is actually a severe energetic rationing. Every time you mirror a smile, every time you force your vocal cords to project enthusiasm you do not possess, you are borrowing from an already bankrupt energetic ledger. You are essentially taking out a massive loan of cognitive focus just to appear perfectly normal in the eyes of others. This is the hidden cost of the survival mode facade. You are not actively participating in the social dynamic. You are running a complex simulation of a human being. The simulation is practically flawless, but it demands an exorbitant amount of mental fuel to maintain the illusion for hours on end. By the time you finally retreat to the total isolation of your car or your empty apartment, the inevitable bill comes due. The absolute crushing silence that immediately follows is not relaxation. It is the sudden, unceremonious collapse of an organism that has spent every single drop of its remaining resources projecting a convincing hologram of stability to a completely oblivious world. There is a fundamental misunderstanding about what it actually means to feel empty. We tend to imagine emptiness as a lack of mass, a void where something used to be, a passive and effortless state of absence. But the neurological reality of your numbness is exactly the opposite. You are not empty. You are actively suppressing a catastrophic psychological overload, and this suppression requires an astronomical expenditure of continuous effort. Imagine the sheer physical force required to hold a massive, oxygen-filled sphere deep beneath the surface of an ocean. If you look only at the flat, undisturbed water from above, everything appears perfectly still. But underneath that surface, your entire musculature is vibrating with the strain of keeping that sphere submerged. That is what your brain is doing every single second of the day. The numbness you experience is not the absence of emotion. It is the heavy, exhausting, suffocating blanket your nervous system has thrown over a psychological response that it deems too dangerous to process. When you are operating in a severe deficit of mental resources, feeling sadness or grief, or even a flicker of genuine joy, becomes an existential threat to your basic functionality. The human brain is the ultimate economic engine. It calculates the energy cost of every internal event. Right now, it has determined that the metabolic price of experiencing your reality is simply too high. If you were to actually feel the profound exhaustion, the accumulated micro-traumas, or the weight of your unresolved conflicts, you would not be able to get out of bed. You would not be able to answer the emails or perform the social scripts that keep your life from falling apart. Therefore, the emotional centers of your brain are deliberately starved of blood flow and electrical activity. The numbness is a highly sophisticated, energy-intensive barricade. You feel nothing because feeling something would require a structural collapse that your system cannot afford. The internal cost of maintaining this barricade is a slow, invisible hemorrhage of your vitality. You are trading your capacity to experience life for the raw ability to merely survive it. You sit on the couch in the dark, wondering why you cannot cry, or why a massive personal achievement brings you zero satisfaction, without realizing that you are currently executing one of the most demanding cognitive tasks imaginable. To understand what is actually happening inside your head, we must examine the brutal mathematics of human biology. Your nervous system operates on a strict hierarchy of responses when faced with chronic, inescapable pressure. First, it attempts to solve the problem through action. It floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline, demanding that you fight the threat or run away from it. You probably remember this phase. It was the period of intense anxiety, the sleepless nights, the constant racing thoughts, the frantic attempts to fix everything and please everyone. But what happens when you cannot fight the abstract demands of modern life, and you cannot run away from your own responsibilities? When the threat is your mortgage, your career, or a relationship you cannot escape, the action phase eventually fails. The brain realizes that continuing to pump panic chemicals is not only useless, but biologically catastrophic. It is burning fuel you do not have. This is the exact moment the mechanism shifts. Your autonomic nervous system deploys its final, most extreme countermeasure. It drops you out of the frantic fight or flight state and plunges you straight into the dorsal vagal shutdown. This is the emergency brake of the human body. The neurological connection between your cognitive brain and your emotional centers is systematically muffled. The vividness of your sensory perception is dialed down. You are no longer living. You are simply being preserved. This transition shatters your sense of self. You look back at the person who used to care so deeply, who used to cry over a movie or feel a rush of excitement for a weekend trip, and you cannot recognize them. You begin to identify as a defective machine, a hollow shell who has somehow lost their fundamental humanity. You convince yourself that your character is flawed, but your identity has not been destroyed. It has been temporarily archived. You are experiencing the neurological equivalent of a computer running in safe mode. The screen is dim, the background applications are disabled, and only the absolute bare minimum of operating code is allowed to execute. You are judging your core identity based on a physiological state designed exclusively for enduring a famine of mental energy. The most terrifying consequence of this extended shutdown is the narrative you begin to construct about who you are. You look at your inability to cry at a funeral, or your complete indifference to a partner's distress, and you secretly conclude that you are a monster. You believe that the empathy center of your brain has permanently rotted away. You label yourself as cold, damaged, or fundamentally defective. This is the profound identity inversion that occurs when survival mode stretches from a temporary state into a chronic reality. You are confusing a physiological defense perimeter with a personality trait. Society has conditioned you to measure your humanity by the intensity of your emotional reactions. Therefore, when the reactions vanish, you assume your humanity has vanished with them. Let me reframe the architecture of your current existence. The fact that you feel absolutely nothing is not proof that you are broken. It is the absolute, terrifying proof that your biological systems are working flawlessly. The numbness is a highly successful adaptation to an environment that demanded more output than you could sustainably provide. Think about the sheer arrogance of assuming your body should simply continue to produce complex emotional responses while it is actively starving for mental bandwidth. The empathy you think you have lost requires an immense amount of cognitive surplus to generate. It requires the ability to project yourself into another person's reality, process their pain, and formulate a response. Your system has simply audited your internal resources and concluded that you cannot afford that luxury right now. You are bankrupt. When you finally grasp this mechanical reality, the shame surrounding your emptiness begins to crack. You are not a sociopath. You are a biological organism that has strategically severed non-essential functions to prevent a total system failure. The identity you are mourning, the vibrant, caring, reactive person you used to be, is not dead. That person is simply trapped behind a massive fire door that your own nervous system locked from the outside. You are actively misinterpreting the very mechanism that is currently keeping you alive as the disease that is destroying you. The numbness is not the enemy. It is the bodyguard that stepped in when your conscious mind refused to stop pushing yourself over the edge. We must expand the lens to look at the environment that necessitated this response. You are not an isolated anomaly failing at life. You are a biological organism reacting perfectly to a completely unnatural psychological landscape. The modern world is engineered to keep your nervous system in a state of perpetual, low-grade threat. You wake up to a machine that feeds you global catastrophes before you have even had a glass of water. You commute through artificial concrete grids, sitting in metal boxes, anticipating the microscopic social threats of a workplace that demands your constant, unbroken cognitive availability. This is not the environment your brain evolved to navigate. Your ancestors faced acute physical dangers that had a clear beginning and a definitive end. A predator chased them, they survived, and their nervous system discharged the stress. But your predators are invisible, abstract, and permanent. They are emails, deadlines, financial anxieties, and the relentless pressure of performing your identity on a public stage. When the threat never leaves the room, the alarm system never turns off. Consequently, millions of people are walking around right now, executing the exact same survival simulation you are. They are perfectly dressed, sitting in cafes, typing on laptops, projecting the same hollow confidence, completely severed from their own internal sensations, just to make it to the next hour. Therefore, the absolute crushing fatigue you feel at the end of a seemingly normal day is not a personal failure of stamina. It is the inescapable physics of your biological reality. The normalization of your exhaustion lies in understanding the sheer, brutal mechanics of psychological suppression. You are constantly overriding the body's natural impulse to collapse. When a system is chronically starved of rest, the brain must reallocate energy from non-essential departments just to keep the lights on in the prefrontal cortex, so you can continue to function in society. The energy required to maintain the wall between your conscious awareness and the massive reservoir of unprocessed stress is monumental. You are essentially running a high-security prison inside your own head, and every single guard is working double shifts without a break. The fatigue is just the predictable metabolic exhaust of this massive internal operation. You wonder why a simple conversation feels like a marathon, or why the thought of going to a grocery store requires a complex internal negotiation. It is because your cognitive battery is already hovering at 1%, and every minor social interaction threatens to shut the entire system down completely. This brings us to the profound complication of your current identity. If the numbness is merely a protective armor forged by absolute necessity, a critical and dangerous threshold is eventually crossed. When you wear a heavy suit of armor for long enough, the muscles underneath begin to severely atrophy. The The skin forgets the sensation of the wind. You start to mistake the cold, rigid steel of the defense mechanism for the actual boundary of your own physical body. This is where the survival mode transforms from a temporary biological shelter into a permanent cognitive prison. You are no longer just protecting yourself from external overload. You are now actively terrified of the very vulnerability that would signal your return to a living, breathing state. The numbness becomes comfortable in its absolute predictability. Feeling nothing is a terrible existence, but feeling everything again seems like an unbearable apocalypse that would shatter your fragile control. You have adapted so perfectly to the darkness of the bunker that the idea of stepping out into the blinding light of your own emotional reality induces a secondary, paralyzing level of panic. You are trapped in a paradox where the cure feels infinitely more dangerous than the disease. You cling to the emptiness because it is the only landscape you know how to navigate without collapsing. This brings us to the ultimate transaction your nervous system has negotiated on your behalf. There is a brutal economic trade-off occurring beneath your conscious awareness, and you are currently paying the premium. To survive the overwhelming demands of your environment, your brain has essentially agreed to amputate your subjective experience of reality in exchange for pure mechanical functionality. You get to keep your job, your relationships, and your status as a reliable human being, but the cost is the total eradication of your internal landscape. You are trading your capacity to feel the warmth of the sun or the genuine connection of a conversation just to ensure that the biological machine does not completely collapse under the weight of its own psychological debt. This is the mechanism of survival operating at its absolute peak efficiency. It is ruthlessly prioritizing the continuation of the organism over the quality of the organism's existence. The biological imperative is not concerned with your happiness or your sense of fulfillment. It is exclusively concerned with keeping the heart beating and the lungs expanding, even if it means plunging the conscious mind into an endless, frozen winter. When you look closely at the neurological architecture of this shutdown, you realize that the control room was never truly abandoned. The system is highly active, but its entire bandwidth is dedicated to enforcing the perimeter. The energy that was once used to generate joy, curiosity, or even profound sadness is now entirely consumed by the invisible effort of keeping the emergency brake fully engaged. This clarifies why the numbness is so incredibly exhausting. You are essentially pressing the accelerator to the floor while simultaneously standing with all your weight on the brakes. The engine is roaring, the fuel is burning at an unsustainable rate, but the vehicle is completely paralyzed. And as you sit there, locked in this internal stalemate, the most disturbing question begins to emerge. If this perfectly calibrated defense mechanism is the only thing standing between your current state of numb functionality and a total catastrophic nervous breakdown, what happens to the person you used to be? You have successfully barricaded the door against the overwhelming flood of your own suppressed reality. You have achieved the ultimate, terrifying safety of absolute emotional zero. But the identity you sacrificed to build this fortress is still trapped somewhere on the other side of that locked door. The silent calculation remains, waiting for an external signal of absolute safety that may never actually arrive. The nervous system is an incredibly patient and ruthless architect. It has built this fortress of numbness around your consciousness, and it will strictly maintain the perimeter for as long as it calculates the external world to be a continuous threat. You are waiting for a moment of profound safety to finally thaw the ice, to open the heavy fire door and let the archived version of yourself step back into the light. You believe that one day, the environment will simply calm down enough for your biology to naturally release the emergency brake. But the modern world does not offer inherent stillness. The inbox will never be completely empty. The social expectations will never fully vanish. And the baseline hum of ambient anxiety is now the permanent background radiation of human existence. The biological mechanism that saved you by shutting everything down is perfectly content to leave you in this frozen state indefinitely. It does not care that you secretly miss the sensation of joy, or that you are quietly grieving the loss of your own tears. It only cares that you survived today, so you can repeat the exact same hollow performance tomorrow. And as you sit there, perfectly still, perfectly numb, and perfectly functional, the ultimate tension remains completely unresolved. If the environment never provides the absolute safety required to lower the bridge, and your nervous system refuses to release the shutdown protocol until it does, who is going to make the first move?